Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat class. Shabbat Parashat Mikess, Shabbat Hanukkah as well. The question is, what happened to the dreams? I dedicate this class in honor of recent marriage of my son, Mosey Matalon, to his new wife, Joni, now Matalon, and give this class as an elaboration of what was my speech at his wedding, where I'll take the very same format and idea and expound upon it. So what did I mean by my question? What happened to the dreams? Well, really, it's quite the contrary, seemingly, because dreams are a recurring theme throughout the book of Bereshit. And what's astounding is that you see the dreams take place with world leaders, right? We have the kidnapping of Sarah by Paro. He had a dream. Then you had Abimelech, and he had a dream. And then you had last week's Parashat, Sarah Ofim and Sarah Mushkim, the officers, the head of baking and of the wines. They had dreams. And really, now there became almost a dominant role in the Torah. Besides Joseph's dreams, we have, of course, the famous dreams of Paro to start Parashat Mikess. And it's really a stunning phenomenon in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not only in terms of his communication with kings, we see him direct almost the decision-making of kings, but he really manipulates the thought process of world leaders and thereby of international politics. This mode of communication, first, the fact that someone is a world leader means he was appointed by God for better or for worse. You can hate him or you can love him. He's appointed by God. Trump, Biden, both God appointed. And they merit, you can say, because of that, this divine communication. But as we said, Kadosh Baruch Hu is actually doing that for a longer term purpose, and that is where he is in charge of all international affairs, as decided on Rosh Hashanah, what countries go to war, peace, etc. No time more probably in world history that we can recognize how Hashem manipulates international politics than today. Things that we see are hard to believe. But with all of that communication to world leaders, actually, we observe the very contrary regarding Jewish leaders. How so? Because Yosef HaSadiq had his dreams ben sheva shana v'hu na'ar as a young boy. And afterwards, Yosef becomes a world leader. Where are the dreams? Have we seen one more dream after this teenage kid originally was privy and merited those communications from Hashem? And then he actually becomes a world leader, and we see not one more dream from Yosef. And so how is it the converse with Jewish leaders, seemingly, than the non-Jewish leaders? So let's first understand the fact that, as we mentioned, it says in Mishleh, Palgei Mayim, Kilev Melech B'Yad Hashem, Akol Asher Yachpos Yatenu. That God really is doing that for a purpose. The heart of the king is in the hand of God, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not because they're privileged, because they merit, is because he has a hand in the affairs of the world, and therefore in the affairs of the leaders of the world. So kings really have a separate objective and a separate distinction for getting their dreams. But let's look at Yosef. Let's look at Yosef. So Yosef is this young man, and Yosef has this dream, and we're actually told that V'hu na'ar, sometimes by the commentaries, is looked as a negative description. It's almost like a lack of maturity a lack of readiness in terms of handling the dream, a lack of experience in being able to apply the dreams. And he's not. He gets these dreams, and what happens afterwards? There's a 13-year hiatus between then and until when he becomes a world leader. 13 years in between, you know what happens? His experiences in Potiphar and the jail, etc. And on the back end of those experiences, first of all, toward the end of them, with the Sara Mashkim and Sara Ofim, and then certainly at the end of them, those 13 years, when he becomes the world leader, the viceroy to Paro, we see him become a dream interpreter. And so really the Torah is giving us the entire sky view of Yosef's seemingly transformation from a dreamer. Then you have 13 seemingly difficult years in between, where towards the end, he is somewhat of a dream interpreter on a local, personal level. And on the other side of the ocean of his 13 years of trials and tribulations, he goes not from a dreamer, but to a dream interpreter. What is this a positive transformation? Is this a distinction? Is this a development, ascending or descending? What is with the dreams, and how is the Torah depicting Yosef and in general world leaders and telling us the purpose of dreams based on that? So we need to take a deeper dive. And let's first understand something about dreams themselves. Let's understand that in a much deeper level, that Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lusato, in his great work, Derech Hashem, teaches us, the Gemara says that in Berachot, that there's no, there's no dream without nonsense in it. Does that mean that all dreams are nonsensical and should just be dismissed? Not necessarily. Does that mean that every dream has some type of deep meaning and you have to wake up and look for? Not necessarily at all. But he goes on to explain, and we're just going to barely scratch the surface, but that we have different, so to speak, components of our neshama. Part of it disengages from our body during our course of sleep, whether it's long or short. It's part of the nefesh, so to speak, and it gets to interact because it is itself metaphysical. It's not from the physical world. Our neshama doesn't belong here. It gets to interact with the metaphysical world and all types of characters in the metaphysical world, be they positive characters, negative characters like mazichim and shedim, and they indeed nefesh gets certain communications and certain messages. And that doesn't always make it down back to the body or to the intellect. By the time the person wakes up, a lot of it gets lost in communication, or lost in a person's journey and his voyage that he takes in his travels, so to speak, that he takes from upper to lower world. But some of it is maintained. Now, when it's maintained, it becomes sometimes, or most of the time, very convoluted with all our worldly thoughts on a psychological level that are in our mind as well. And it's indiscernible most of the time. It's indiscernible. But there are certain communications, few times in our life, that seem to be astounding to us. We know there's some depth in it. We can't believe it. And for greater people that have more depth and more clarity and less nonsense in their minds, that comes more often. Those are real. Those are real communications that came from olamot, be they a negative, destructive, or constructive metaphysical worlds, so to speak. That's a actual potential revelation that every person has based on dreams. That's just on the surface. In any case, for an average person, he doesn't merit direct divine communications from God. For an average person, now people can be they're young, very talented, very intellectual, they have incredible abilities, but that talent is raw for the most part. A person can even be very deep, very spiritual, very knowledgeable at a young age. but yet not savvy, right? Not really able to understand how to place and what to do with this great knowledge and spirituality. So, for the most part, we, when we're young and haven't really gone into life, are dreamers, right? Um, those of us that engage in Torah and Mitzvot, our dreams are virtuous. We dream of real important, deep ideas and very significant plans, but we're still just dreamers. We imagine what we could be, what could be of our lives, what could be of the world and of our surroundings and of our future accomplishments. Those are dreams. For those who are greater, those exceptional individuals that are really at high levels of intellect, spirituality, and holiness, like Yosef HaSadiq, those dreams are not just generated of possible thoughts in our minds, they're actual divine premonitions, we can call them. Now, Yosef was not a Nabi, he was not a prophet, but one step removed. Sometimes we call it Ruach HaKodesh. Certainly, Yosef thought his dreams to be just that. And then, after those dreams of Yosef, something happened. That's a 13-year period of time until he actually escalated in his life. What happened to Yosef was life. Life happened to Yosef. When life happened to Yosef, it developed him as a person. He was no longer a na'ad, not just by virtue of years passing, because a person doesn't necessarily mature just because years pass. There's plenty of childlike people at 50, 60, and 70 years old, right? He developed from a na'ad because his life experiences were taken so seriously. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hardened him, developed him. We can only imagine, we're given glimpses of those 13 years. But first, the very idea, the traumatic idea of being sold by family into slavery, taken away from your birthplace and your only home, to be among strangers in the middle of nowhere. Those years, he indeed, under Potiphar's estate and dominion, had a lot of success. But as a stranger, as a loner, how much did he develop as an individual, as a godly person during the course of those years? Get to know what God is doing, why he's doing it, perhaps. And then, of course, there was the tragic episode where he was hoodwinked, there was conniving, and an injustice done to him, put in a jail cell, fell from all his accomplishments, disappeared overnight. And then once again, he was in a lowly state of slavery and imprisonment and difficulty once again. And then once again, he built up, he scratched and clawed his way up to development and success, and all the way through developing his perspective, his spirituality, his connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He became a savvy, experienced, life individual. Those years transformed him. It changed him completely. And Yosef went from being a dreamer about what could be. And he took his dreams very seriously when he was young, which is why he told them. But when he was a na'ad, he was almost indiscriminately just throwing them out there. And it invoked the rage of his brothers, the jealousy of his brothers, and even the scorn and rebuke of his father, right? And what are you doing? What are you trying to say with all of this? But after he became savvy and experienced, there was no longer a need for dreams, because he was above that and beyond that. He went from a worker to a manager, because now his clarity and perspective on life was such that he didn't have to dream, he understood dreams. His early dreams, he didn't understand. He knew there was a message there, but he couldn't interpret them. Now, he was actually an interpreter of dreams. And now, towards the end of the 13 years, maybe 11 years in, Sarah Mashkim, Sarah Ofim, it was almost a test run for Yosef. Individuals, low risk, right? He was very confident. He said, it's God. Let me have it. Let me take a crack at it. Indeed, he nailed it on the spot. Dus is dus. He went from being this dreamer to this sophisticated interpreter of dreams. This is a step above dreaming. Life is what brought Yosef and developed him through the help of God to this other level. So that by the time he hit Par'ah, he was actually interpreting dreams and on an international, national, and international impactful level. And Yosef has gone, we have to appreciate, how this development happened, where through the impetus, through the prompting of God, he was able to reach the next step in life. We don't all merit that. We're not all conscious of such things. And look at the description of the Torah. How was Yosef described in the beginning of last week's Parashat Vayeshev? Ben Zikunim hu lo. And what does Zikunim mean? The Targum Unkelus there says, Bar Hakim. He had great chokhmah. He had great intellect. And he had great potential. But look at the description by Par'ah after, his life developed and became a savvy person and he became an interpreter. Par'ah said, once God has revealed all of this to you, en nabon v'hacham kamocha. To add to his description and his title was not just hacham, but navon. Navon is someone who can generate wisdom on his own because of his sophistication of understanding. And so that is now the new title, the new Yosef. And what I explained, the wedding, is that a person when he's young is a dreamer. A person, if he allows himself to develop through life in the prism of Torah and Mitzvot, becomes from a dreamer to a visionary. Because now he's living life. Now his dreams are playing out, not just being, that's in the planning stage, but he is now has visions. Visions are real. Visions are substantive. And look how Yosef's visions played out. Now he knows exactly how these communications are actually what we call tachlis, lama'aseh, are now applicable and actually in real time, currently able to apply to life. First, it is with Par'ah. He told Par'ah, and this is what impressed him so much, that exactly what the dreams meant, and he took it a step further. And he says, Ata yireh Par'ah. Now I told you what's coming. Now let me tell you what you should do about it. And he went on to tell him that he needs to appoint someone we know the whole story, on Par'ah, on the economy, and have an initiative of storage and of preparation. And he actually planned out the national survival and really by extension of the countries around Mitzrayim, the international survival of the world based on his vision that he had, his understanding of how to apply dreams, of how to actually do what God meant with them. And that is to integrate them into real life. Look how else he uses visionary abilities. Afterwards, when he revealed himself to the brothers, and he started to give them a little musad. This is in next week's parasha. And he told them, go down to my father and very quickly tell him that I'm alive and bring him here. And Yosef's next vision was what dream A, at least according to the Ramban's interpretation of his first dream was, and that is, the second dream was, and that is get the Jewish people down to Egypt. In other words, he was responsible to his, unfortunate distinction to be the impetus for the first galut, the first exile. But he knew that had to happen. And he did it in such a wise way with the vision. He sent certain gifts and wagons, something to prompt his father's memory and belief. He told his brothers on the way down, I'll get to the Gizu Badar. It could be a disaster if the whole thing could unfold if they fight and have a blame game on the way down. He facilitated this galut, this descent from Israel to Egypt, because he knew through his dream that was his job. And he had now this vision, a clear understanding of not just the first dream, which we explained in past classes, which is to go through the process of facilitating the teshubah, the repentance of his brothers, But the second dream of the bigger responsibility of actually initiating this exile, he understood that vision. And then finally, this great visionary actually used his ability and insight and sophisticated understanding to envision what the survival of the Jewish people would be for the next 200 plus years until we enter our land 210 years later. And that, of course, was okay. Yashavta Beres Goshen, live here, be self-contained, be isolated. Here's the tools for survival. Here's how to play the game with Para'ah. Here's where you need to be. And the Jews, although, of course, it was a tragic eventuality with the slavery, were able to survive based on the visionary abilities of Yosef. And so you see that world leaders, maybe there's a sophistication in that they have a distinct privilege of communication by God, but sometimes, to their chagrin is because God is manipulating, controlling them. But Jewish leaders who step up, go from what we all are when we're in our youth, which is just dreamers, and what they can become, maybe from a real dream communication from God, and what we all can become if we develop in life through Torah and Mitzvot, to elevate ourselves to the next level from just being a dreamer to be a visionary, as Yosef HaSadik became, and as each one of us can become and should become in our lives, having our dreams play out the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu meant them to be. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen. Shabbat Shalom and Chanukah Sameach.